These might be the best muffins I've ever made. Amazing. So these are a paleo apple, cinnamon, and walnut muffin. I will leave the recipe that I used in the description below. It's not my recipe. I didn't have the capacity to start from scratch today. So I used a recipe and it did not disappoint. The only thing I might do is like add a little bit of butter on this, but when they're warm, so good. So good. Anyways, hi everyone. Welcome back to my channel. It's been a minute. I feel like I say that every time I come back on here, but life just happens. Summer happens. My health happened, which is what we're going to talk about in today's video. And I'm in my last few days of being 29. This summer I thought a lot about my last year in my 20s and what it looked like. And there was a lot of chaos. There was a lot of busy. There was a full schedule. There was a ton of deadlines. That's mostly because I went back to school. But then when I thought about the last year of my 20s and then thought back to just my 20s as a whole, there was a lot of hustle. There was a lot of growth. There was a lot of schooling. There was a lot of education. There was a lot of change in passions. There was a lot of things that evolved. My YouTube channel, my social media platform. I've redone my website a couple times. There's just a lot of growth that happened personally, or professionally, I guess, in my business. And I'm super grateful for that. I love that. But my 30s, I have a different expectation for my 30s. My 30s, I just want to be calm. I want to be less. I want to be free. I want to have less time restriction. I want to have less of a structured schedule. I didn't think I would want that, but it's literally something that I'm craving. I'm craving having more time. I'm craving having more flexibility. I mean, when I say I want to work less, everybody wants to work less, but I don't want to work as long or as hard in that time frame and just be more efficient with my time. That's what I'm trying to say. I want to be more efficient so that I'm not struggling to try and get something done. And there's going to be a lot of things that come into play with that. Outsourcing, maybe other people helping. Anyways, that's for a whole other video. The point of this is that I am just really taking the next few days of reflection and saying, what matters most to me right now? Not in 5 years, not in 10 years, right now. And I hope that I can carry this through my 30s of the idea of having less, doing less, being less. We'll see. Obviously can't predict that. And I don't want to live that far in the future, but it's definitely a tone I want to set moving into my 30s. Because I feel like I just need it. And it's pretty clear that it is something that I need after getting some results back that I had done for functional diagnostic testing. And that's honestly what I wanted to talk about in today's video and coming back on this platform, because I shared really quickly about it on my Instagram a couple weeks ago. And I basically just said, you know, I had some surprising test results come up, and I asked if you guys wanted me to share this part of my journey. And over the years, I've shared little bits of like where my health is at. I've talked about my high levels of inflammation. I've talked about being celiac. I've talked about different cleanses or protocols I've done. So this one I wanted to see if it was something you guys were interested in learning more about, because I had some quite surprising results come up. And so many of you said, please share this part of your journey. And usually I'm like not at all like a closed book. Like I will share any type of wellness thing that I've experienced or that I recommend. Like I love sharing those types of things, but the results on this was just a little bit surprising for me, and I was a little bit taken back as a practitioner and also as somebody who's been working on healing for so many years to get these results back and go, really? That's what's going on? So quick backstory. I've talked about this in previous videos. I went back to school for a functional diagnostic nutrition program to become a practitioner and to be able to offer more functional lab testing to get to more root causes. And this is something that I have been wanting to do for several years. I toyed with the idea of going back to school to be a naturopath. I looked at other programs. I looked at this program. There was just a lot of like thought process that went to what is the next step out of being a holistic nutritionist. I'm gonna be honest, there's a lot of nutritionists in the world now. When I first became a nutritionist, there was a handful of us. Now everybody and their mother's nutritionist, which I think is amazing because I've learned and healed so much on my own this way. But there were a couple of pieces where I was like, I just wish I could get a little bit more for the results. And I went and saw an ND. She was great. She helped me with my hormones, getting some hormone testing. But the process of getting into an ND was just quite drawn out. You know, to get an appointment with an ND was just a little bit too long of a time frame. And I think because people are trusting more in natural approaches versus conventional, so more people are seeking out naturopaths, which is amazing, but not amazing if it takes you 6, 12, 24 weeks to see it. So I wanted to be able to offer more clinical lab testing and to help people interpret those results to help heal themselves. So this is basically where I ended up in this course. So part of the program was to run a couple of the functional diagnostic tests on yourself and then interpret the results. So the 4 tests that told me the most amount of information that was incredibly helpful was 1, the GI map, which was a DNA stool analysis, a metabolic wellness profile, stress and hormone panel, and then a mucosal barrier assessment. So I'm going to take you through and show you what my results are, what I was so surprised on, and kind of like what my next plan of action is with these results. So I'm going to get quite personal here and tell you exactly what my results are. As you can see, this is my name here. This is legitimately my test results. I'm only going to focus on the things that I tested positive or negative, like low on. I'm not going to talk about things that I didn't detect. I don't need to go through all of these single ones. So let's go right down to the main player here. H. pylori. This shocked me. I was shocked to see that I had H. pylori, and it's actually quite common, but it can lay dormant in the GI system. So, you know, if you don't test for something like this, you may never know you have it. But the problem with H. pylori, and this is where I kind of screwed up on my healing, we'll say, is I've been working to heal my gut lining for years. And it's something that I do believe is an ongoing process because there's so many things that affect the gut. What you eat, pesticides, herbicides, stressors, mental and emotional health. There's just so many things that interfere with the gut lining. So I was constantly trying to, fight off, let's say, overgrowth of bad bacteria and bring in as much good bacteria. But I wasn't getting anywhere. And there was just some symptoms that I was continuously struggling with, one of them being major inflammation, heightened anxiety levels, change in bowel movements, bloating, severe abdominal pain that would just come and go. And it was kind of frustrating because as a practitioner, when you have all these tools that are really supportive, but you're not seeing any results from it, you're like, what the heck is going on? What the heck is going on is H. pylori, because this little bugger can literally embed in the GI tract and stay there for so long. It's very hard to eradicate unless you're using herbal remedies to do so. And it is such a negative factor when it comes to healing the gut lining. So seeing this as a positive result was shocking, but also okay, this is why I still feel terrible. So that's one result I found amazing. In terms of bacterial flora, I had some that were quite low. And the problem with this is when we have bacteria that we want in the system in a good amount, if they're too low, this can result in dysbiosis, which can be a major contributor to GI issues. And I just want to get some of these levels optimal, not high, but optimal. And this is surprising because some of these bacteria strains are in my probiotics I've been taking, but the overgrowth of other bacteria can cause these to be low, as well as other factors as well. I'm not going to go into them in great detail, but just what I'm going to say here is I did have some normal bacterial flora that are low. Moving on down here, same thing, streptococcus. This is so interesting that it's high because this has probably been high my entire life. Bacillus, this is the most common strain of bacteria that we see in probiotics. It's added to yogurt, things like that. But it's too high for what my system needs right now. Moving on down. No candida, which is great. So funny, I've done many candida protocols. So this could be why I have no detectable levels here, but also it could have been H. pylori that I really needed to treat, not candida. Moving on down. No worms. Hallelujah. This is where it gets interesting. Okay. Secretory IgA. This is basically a immune response is happening in the body. So secretory IgA helps to combat common colds and flus. It also really helps to bring down inflammation. It really supports the GI tract, and it's primarily secreted in the GI tract. So we want this to be within optimal range. We don't want to have it too high because that means we're having an immune response, but we also don't want to see it too low because we want our body to be as supportive as possible. It's so interesting because I actually have not been sick very often, and it's very uncommon for me to get sick. So to see this low just tells me my body is in overdrive with cortisol and other hormones that are just trying to keep me afloat. And this, unfortunately, the SIG-A is just too low, and we want to bring that up. But interestingly enough, the most shocking thing I saw on here was the next immune response result. So anti-gliadin IgA result of 95. The structured range is 0 to 157. But why this was so shocking to me is because this test right here tells us how much essentially gluten is in the system and what you're responding to. So if we saw this as a very high result, there could potentially be an allergy or sensitivity. The lower we see it, the less we see it as a problem in the immune system, resulting in a high result here. The problem for me in particular is this value should be 0 for me. Essentially, hopefully, we wish it would be 0 because I'm celiac. I follow a gluten-free diet, and I've been following a gluten-free diet for over probably 10 years. So for me to even have a reading here was a little bit alarming because for somebody who does have an allergy to something and continuously has exposure to it, it's causing so much inflammation and immune response and stress on the GI system when it's trying to not come face to face with these types of proteins. So to even have a result here, I was quite shocked. What this tells me is that I'm either having cross-contamination quite frequently in my diet, or there's cross-contamination of wheat in grains that could be grown around wheat. Now, this could be from oats, rice, bean, legume, things like that could be grown around wheat. This could cause this result of a higher gliadin here, which is potentially what my practitioner was suggesting, is that I'm just a little bit more sensitive than most individuals to those additional grains. So part of my protocol will be trying to eliminate grains, but there's going to be a whole bunch of hoops I kind of need to go through. So this was the first test I did, and it was honestly my favorite. There's just so much information here. Again, like, I'm not going to go through into detail, but just seeing some overgrowth and then some lack of bacteria, as well as the H. pylori, was just quite substantial. And it's going to be a huge step in my healing journey, which I'm so grateful to know about. Okay, next up is my mucosal barrier assessment. So this is a test that is a dried blood spot test, and it's testing different markers that could be happening in the mucosal barrier. So zonulin. This is a marker that's talking a lot about the integrity of the gut lining. The higher result we have tells us we've got some leaky gut going on, we have some inflammation in the gut tract, and I'm quite on the borderline here. DOA and histamine, these kind of go hand in hand. Histamine in particular, this is a response from foods. It could be different types of things that are creating histamine in the body, like different types of bacteria, but I was quite high here. And the problem with being high histamine is this can also contribute to high inflammation, and it's something I've been suffering with for quite some time. DOA is the enzyme that helps to kind of break down the amount of histamine in the system. I have an okay amount of it, but this should essentially be in a higher range, closer to 43, so that I can have enough to help to eliminate the more histamine, but there's just something that's going on between these two that's not allowing them to kind of level out and have a low ratio, essentially. Those are seriously the Coles notes. It's so much more in depth, and that's what I would be doing as a practitioner, to talk a little bit more in depth as to why these levels are like this. But I just want to give you a quick overview of some of the results that I got, and that helps to put the pieces together. Okay, this is the next one, which is the metabolic wellness profile. It tested 3 different markers: indican, which tells us about protein digestion. It also tells us about the integrity of the gut lining as well. There could potentially be SIBO that's happening, which I do know there is some dysbiosis for sure. So because of the results I had on the stool test, I wasn't surprised to see this as a high result. It also telling me that I'm not necessarily breaking down my digested proteins as much as the body should be. So this is a good marker to see that there's some issues. Now, it's so interesting because I do take a digestive enzyme. So I do take things to help support the breakdown of proteins as well as bile, which I'll talk about in just a minute. But I was actually taking the wrong digestive enzyme, because when you have H. pylori, there are certain types of enzymes you need to avoid because they become basically inactive if H. pylori is present. So fun fact, I've been taking the wrong digestive enzyme for a few months, and that's okay. It's just really helpful to see these results and make sure that the next steps I'm taking are better. Total bile acids. So this is helping to tell how much bile acids are through the system and potentially what could be spilling over from the system in which it filters through. So high bile acids could indicate that there is a gallbladder dysfunction. It could indicate that there is a liver dysfunction. And I actually do have quite a high result here as well. I'm not surprised. I've always had trouble digesting fats. So I have relied on this specific enzyme that I've been taking to help break down the fats, but essentially it's not helping in the long run because some of the enzymes become deactivated, as I mentioned, because of the H. pylori. So really grateful marker to see some results here. And then the 8-OHDG, this is for oxidative stress. So the higher amount of oxidative stress you have in the system essentially is very damaging long-term and also in the present. It does contribute to inflammation, fatigue, change in hormones, and also long-term it can lead to other oxidative stress promoted type of diseases, potentially cancer. That's quite on the far end of the spectrum here, but it's just really good to see these types of markers as well and see kind of where your baseline is at. Okay, the last test is a stress and hormone profile. I'm not gonna go through this in great detail because it is quite hard to interpret, especially through the screen. There's so many other factors that go into these test results. But basically this test is telling me what my estrogen, my progesterone is, as well as the ratio between the two. I need more estrogen and more progesterone, but some of the symptoms that I have of hormonal imbalances are due to a lack of progesterone. So just trying to even out the ratio between these two and just try to get some of my symptoms subside is what my goal is here. But most importantly, the most important piece of this test for me personally is the cortisol to DHEA ratio, and then also the breakdown of the two. So basically, a lot of my results are quite low compared to what ideally for my age, my activity level should be, but there's a lot of factors that play into this. So I'm not going to go into great detail, but basically the results here confirm that I am quite stressed. I'm running on cortisol for many different things, which is not surprising because I do have some fatigue, but also I have a lot of inflammation, and cortisol and inflammation go hand in hand. And I also am an A-type personality. I'm very busy. And as I mentioned, I want to slow this stage of my life down moving into my 30s so that I can hopefully have more balanced cortisol levels to keep me more sustained throughout the day and also through the evening. So those were a little bit too low for the ideal range, which tells me I'm just in a little bit of a burnout stage. Also DHEA, this is kind of the sister or partner hormone to cortisol. And it is a little bit high for a reference range of a female, but this can be a reflection of cortisol as well. Again, these are just footnotes. I'm not going to go into great detail as to why these results are, but my main goal here is to focus on the cortisol. It is also telling us melatonin daytime. This tells us the daytime melatonin because most people think melatonin is only being produced in the evening to help with sleep, which is true through the pineal gland. But for the GI tract, we also secrete melatonin there, and actually almost 400 times more melatonin in the gut lining. And this is to help with the immune system. It's to help keep the circadian rhythm balanced. It's helping with inflammation of the GI system as well. So we do want to know what this result is, and mine is within range, but on the lower end of the range. We also test secretory IgA in this one again, which was quite high, which is the exact opposite of my stool results. So there was some interesting correlations between the two and when we tested for the secretory IgA, what time of the day. So it could have been that I was in an inflammatory response during the time that I took this test, which is not unlikely because I have those flare-ups quite often. And then also it's testing testosterone, which mine was not too high, not too low, but still is a reflection of progesterone and estrogen being imbalanced as well too. So this is kind of what my graph looks like for my cortisol levels. If you can see the green, this is essentially where we want to be falling in this category. But, we want to have a high in the morning, natural decline through the day. We want just like a nice shape here. Mine isn't nice. Mine is just too low for me and for what should be, within standard. So those are my up close and personal test results that I'm happy to share, and hopefully you got some insight as to what you could expect by taking these tests as well too, which I will very soon be able to offer to all of my clients. I just have a few more exams to finish up. I'll be officially graduated, and then I will make an announcement letting you know what my new packages and prices for different tests like this cost. So stay tuned for that. As always, it'll be available through Joanne's Place. Yeah, just hold tight for that. There's also another really exciting big announcement coming through at Joanne's Place in the next couple of weeks. So yeah, I'll let you know as soon as that does. Anyways, hope you enjoyed seeing some of those test results and actually seeing how beneficial these can be for your healing journey. As I mentioned, I would have never realized I had H. pylori because I don't really have any symptoms associated with H. pylori, but I wouldn't necessarily have known that that was an underlying stressor to me if I had not done these tests. So I think they're very, very helpful in your healing journey. And I think it's also important because so many people spend money on supplements and lifestyle changes and things like that that could in fact be putting you steps back in your healing journey rather than steps forward. So I think it's really important to test instead of guess and just make sure that you're actually healing the body the way in which you need to based on what's going on in your body, not necessarily something that you think is going on or that, say, somebody else has gone through and you're trying to, mimic what they've done. So that's kind of what I want to talk about in today's video. I wanted to give you guys an honest, reflection of where my health is at, because even somebody who's been prioritizing their healing journey for so many years, I still have a lot of work to do. And I want to know if this is something you want to see more of. Do you want to see what this healing journey looks like for me? Do you want to see, my grocery shops, my meal preps, potentially some supplements that I'm including? Do you want to see my retest? Like, do you guys want to see this part of my journey of trying to navigate H. pylori and also get my cortisol levels managed out? If you do, drop a comment below, thumbs up, like this video, just let me know. Let me know if this is something you want to see. And I will definitely record it kind of, as I go, whenever that is, and as, probably sporadic as I intend it to be, because it probably will be. It might be a few days at a time recording put into one video. I don't know. I have no idea what it could look like because I don't want to put a plan in play. But if you do want to learn more about it or see this part of my journey, let me know and I will try to document as much as I possibly can. So my next step is focusing on the H. pylori. I'm going to be doing some dietary changes to my current diet. My main thing being that I will be going to a strict paleo diet. I've done this before. It's been incredibly therapeutic for me. But through the summer, I just naturally let things pop in that had grains in it, essentially, that were still gluten-free, but like hamburger buns, bread, rice, things like that. But moving forward through fall and part of winter, I'm going to be focusing more on really grounding, healing vegetables, high protein, moderate fat, and just try to get my GI system, less inflamed and more nourished as I try to navigate through the eradication of H. pylori as well, which will mostly include supplements, but also some herbal teas and things like that. So that's my next step. I've been working on the stress. I think I've got, a good routine with that. Next up is H. pylori, and then getting it all together by rebuilding the gut lining and building that gut integrity as well too. So that's everything that I wanted to share with you guys today. I hope you've had just an amazing, beautiful summer, that you're just rolling into the fall and ready to kind of settle down. That's the consensus I'm getting from a lot of people, is they just want that slow living feel. And I'm here for it. I am all here for it. I want to share those little moments more on Instagram, potentially TikTok. So if you haven't followed me on those platforms, go do that. I will leave them in the description below. I will also leave the recipe from today's muffins in below. And I'll be back soon, I promise, with the next video and an update on how my healing journey is going. If you haven't already, please be sure to subscribe to my channel so that you get a notification as soon as my next video is released. Give this video a thumbs up if this is something that you want to see more of, and stay tuned for my next video. And I'll see you guys on my next one.